of the Dragon, Season 3, Episode 3. This was arguably a very singular type of episode in the Game of Thrones universe. A very unique episode. So let's talk about it. Let's discuss the episode, let's compare it to Fire and Blood, and let's make some predictions for the future. But really quick, if you don't know who I am and have never seen my face before, my name is Estella Graves. I'm a fantasy content creator here on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok, and I like to cover things like Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, and A Song of Ice and Fire. So if those are things you are interested in, feel free to check me out on those other apps, and make sure to like and subscribe, and hit that bell notification.
Shame.
To get notified every time I post a video here. Now, without a further ado, let's get into it, and this is your spoiler warning. We will be talking about events in the episode and events in the future of Fire and Blood, so you have been warned. Wow, this episode had everything. And I feel like I've been saying that every time I make one of these videos, but this episode really did have everything. A rat feast, references to the world of Ice and Fire, or really more singular reference to the world of Ice and Fire from what I can remember, and an unbelievable, dare I say, immersion-breaking bleach and tone with no roots. The episode largely focuses on Rhaenyra and her reign within the first few days of taking King's Landing and ascending the Iron Throne. But with that, we do still get to see many of our fan favorite characters like Daemon, Corlys, Mysaria, Alicent, and Helena, as well as the Dragon Seeds. And we even get a brief glimpse at Jace and Baela. Although the Jace seems like a hallucination Jace, but still Jace crumbs. And so with that, we do get to see glimpses of all these characters, but it is all through Rhaenyra's POV, her point of view, which, to be clear, is a very stressed out one, as we are made ever aware throughout the episode that Rhaenyra has basically been set up to fail. Now, how long you think she has been set up to fail varies depending on the person, but it's pretty clear that in the immediate, she has been set up to fail. And it's interesting because a lot of this feels like scene setting for what is to come. We are seeing the beginnings of tragedy brewing here in King's Landing that will eventually come to haunt her and contribute to her downfall. And it's really difficult because some of these things are very clearly by her own design, and other things are just out of hand. So let's kind of tick off the boxes and the list of things that are in her control and out of her control. 1, she has no small council. She basically fired her small council before coming to King's Landing. And honestly, it probably would have been better to keep these people and then kick them out later once the dust settles, but shoulda, woulda, coulda. Her choice was understandable, her small council was undermining her, but it's kind of left her now out to sea. And we see that throughout the episode. She is having to take on so many questions and tasks that really should be delegated to members of the small council that she no longer has. So, yes, that one was kind of in her control, but it is what it is. Out of her control is the royal coffers being emptied. There is no money. There is no money to enact the things they need to enact. And when you really get down and into the nitty-gritty, it really does boil down to money. And now this is a thing from Fire and Blood. We are told that the Greens did empty out the royal vaults. They split up the money and sent it to different places because they wanted Rhaenyra to fail. It was a very politically smart move, and ultimately does cripple Rhaenyra's reign. So I think this thorn in Rhaenyra's side is something we are going to continue to see fester and grow throughout the season, because it's really hard to get anything done when there is no funding for it. Now, things in her control. She advances Mysaria in her position, making her the Mistress of Whispers. And on the surface, this seems like a good thing, but readers of Fire and Blood will know that, again, it's going to end up kind of biting Rhaenyra in the butt. Rhaenyra in her reign starts to become more paranoid, based on the loss of her children and the betrayals she experiences. And with that, she begins to rely more and more on Mysaria, who then in turn contributes to her paranoia. It's not quite stated why Mysaria does this, why she kind of poisons Rhaenyra's mind and betrays her, but with the characterization that we have gotten with Mysaria in the show being very small folk focused, I wouldn't be surprised if at some point in the timeline Rhaenyra does something that makes Mysaria lose faith in her. Or it could just be that Mysaria is very upfront with her and honest in ways that Rhaenyra eventually will not be able to handle. Sometimes it's good to, cushion some things, have a little bit of tact in the way you say things, and maybe Mysaria just being upfront and honest is going to be too much for her. My money's more on the first thing though, considering this season already has been so heavy on the class dynamics and looking at the small folk. I will say too, I said in a previous video that I thought we would continue to see Mizaria and Damon kind of bickering and going tit for tat, and I am very happy that we have seen that. It adds a little bit of levity, which boy do we need in this episode because it is stressful and breakneck pace. Now, things out of Rhaenyra's control, the hearings, the holding court and listening to petitioners. And I thought this was well handled because it parallels Aegon sitting on the throne last season. It shows that sometimes there really are no right answers, and you can't please everyone. Not to mention Rhaenyra doing all of this while on her period. And this is an interesting thing to me because in Fire and Blood, it's stated that Rhaenyra cuts herself on the throne, and there are many shots of her kind of gripping the throne in ways that made me kind of anxious at the edge of my seat thinking, oh my gosh, is she gonna cut herself? But no, we don't see her at any point cut herself on screen, but we do see her have her period. And so in a way, it's kind of a clever way to play with that idea of, she sat on the Iron Throne, she cut herself, and she bled on the Iron Throne. And I've seen some people say it's too on the nose, it's too heavy-handed. But personally, I think that for some people it wasn't. I think for people that are very online, like myself, it can feel a bit derivative, or like others have said, heavy-handed. I can totally see that. But it's kind of like the Barbie movie, as odd as that sounds. When the Barbie movie came out, a lot of people were critiquing it for being kind of basic feminism, surface level, exploring concepts that people had felt that we had moved on from. And I'll admit, I kind of felt that way too when I saw it because I'm very online. But in speaking to people who are not very online, I know a lot of people, a lot of men and a lot of women who found the movie to be kind of revolutionary in the messaging, actually incredibly helpful and moving. So I think for some, the Rhaenyra getting her period might feel a bit eye-rolly or a bit, heavy-handed. But for others, I've seen a lot of people saying that it actually worked for them and they thought it was very interesting and very moving. It's not lost on me that in a metatextual sense, it kind of is going back and forth with that you can't please everyone idea that Rhaenyra is dealing with in world at the moment. But with that, yes, so out of her control, listening to her small folk, there are certain things that she just cannot help with right now because, again, there is no money. She suggests letting people hunt in the Kingswood. The Kingswood being a kind of private stretch of forest that really is just reserved for the king and nobles to go hunting. And it's interesting because the Kingswood has kind of been this contentious thing that gets brought up quite a bit in regards to, nobility and the privileges that come with being nobility and the small folk. So it's interesting that she suggests people should be able to hunt in the Kingswood, and then very quickly it's like, no, we can't allow that. We see similar issues happening with sheep and goats, like in last season with Aegon, and I was really pleasantly surprised to see Madame Sylvie again. In my previous episode review, I had predicted that she would come back in some way, maybe involving Hugh's storyline, since Hugh seems to be dealing with the small folk quite a bit. Maybe she would be the one to help kind of turn him to the problems of the small folk. But no, she went straight to the source, to Rhaenyra herself, with her pleas, which then results in two controversial decisions by Rhaenyra: the rat feast and the pillaging of the nobles' food stores and redistribution to the small folk. We gotta talk about the rat feast. I have been thinking about it all season, ever since the rumors came out of how they were gonna do it, of how it was gonna be so interesting and fun, and I was not disappointed. In the inside the episode, they go into how all of the items on the plates were actually edible and how they made them look like, rats and little wormy eel things, and how they made it look just really disgusting, but technically it was all just normal food. I just think that's really creative and really fun. And they talked about how it actually did really gross out some of the actors, which I think is good. It did its purpose. It helped immerse the actors in their role. But with that, yeah, very gross and very insulting. I don't think a lot of these nobles are going to forget this, which again could come back to bite Rhaenyra in the butt. She tells all of them that she is having the gold cloaks pillage their food stores, so she then goes and, later redistributes it in front of all the people. And in this, we get a very interesting introduction to Torrhen Manderly. And this is a bit of a change from Fire and Blood, because technically he's not supposed to be in King's Landing during this time, but he will become a more important character later on, so I think it does make sense to introduce him earlier in this way. He's not what I expected, but I am very intrigued. In Fire and Blood, it's stated that he is clever, and I feel like you can almost see that little glint of like Tyrion characterization, but also little hints of like a Littlefinger Varys type thing. It's like he's twiddling his mustache, but he's twiddling his mustache in a way that is on Rhaenyra's side. It's interesting. And again, I'm curious to see where it goes with this character. And even though he only has a few lines, what he does say sticks out. He tells Rhaenyra that she has played her hand well, and it will likely appease the small folk for a short amount of time, but then he does bring up the fact that it was her blockades in the first place that made them starve, which again feels like a little bit of foreshadowing to the idea that these are small gestures that may tide people over for now, but it's a ticking time bomb. She can't appease them forever, and they may eventually turn on her. And so moving on to another thing that is in her control, but not handled very well, I mean, all of these are not handled very well, is what she tells Hugh. Hugh expresses concern about their position, about where he's going to live, about where his wife is, and Rhaenyra gives him just a very basic PR answer that ultimately doesn't feel satisfactory. The thing that is interesting, though, is that Hugh mentions Tumbleton. His wife has gone to Tumbleton. And we keep getting these little mentionings of Tumbleton. They're really building it up because I think that's going to be the season finale. So we're seeding those ideas in early. I've seen a lot of people online debate how Rhaenyra could have gone about this better, but instead she kind of just gives him a nothing burger answer with no clear solution. And it's understandable why she does this. She is stressed out, and we're showcasing that people aren't going to have the perfect answers all the time. But it does show us these little cracks that are already starting to form in Rhaenyra's reign. And so now, something out of her control, the whole Daeron situation. How is she supposed to know that this was the wrong Daeron? Maybe if Daemon paid more attention to Tessarion's reaction to this child, which was very funny. Tessarion was looking like, who's this kid? I don't know, I'm gonna mind my business. Maybe if Daemon was paying more attention to that instead of trying to outmog Ormond and spike his cortisol levels, then we wouldn't have had this Daeron dilemma. And now this is a change from Fire and Blood. We don't have a decoy Daeron situation, but I think it was added just to stir up even more drama. Because Rhaenyra constantly throughout the episode has this looming weight on her chest of, you need to kill Daeron, and Daemon keeps reminding her. Every time he sees her, he's like, you gotta kill that kid, which probably doesn't feel great. And then come to find out, it's not even the right kid. I'm sure she's feeling pretty relieved that she brought Alicent in to look at him before she lobbed his head off. And I don't mind this change. I think it's interesting. But if I am going to be nitpicky, how did Ormond do a bleach and tone that well? How did that child have no roots? And why wouldn't you just go and pick up a kid from Lys? Or really anywhere in Essos. Like, Valyrian traded people are a dime a dozen. No bleach required. I understand dyeing your hair darker, that is a thing in Game of Thrones and in A Song of Ice and Fire, but to get that consistent of a bleach and tone, like so perfect, again, no roots, that is suspending my disbelief a little bit. Maybe he had a little bowl of bleach and toner hidden underneath his bed and every day he was just touching it up, really hoping that no one came in and saw. Maybe. I'm just being silly. But yeah, so decoy Daeron, ooh, where's the real Daeron? I still think it is that one kid that we saw in episode 1. Because this actor is going to be playing Link in The Legend of Zelda, so it makes sense that he wouldn't just be a nameless no one. I think this is Daeron. And the real question is, do we think he dyed his hair darker to be in disguise? Because I think so. Because the decoy Daeron having light blonde hair implies that most people would recognize Daeron from his blonde hair. So I think this like red, high towery colored hair isn't an indication that he's a bastard, that he's Cole's bastard. I think it's just a little bit more of a disguise. But we'll just have to wait and see. So, things in her control. The naming of the dragon seeds. And again, we have some comedy, some levity, thank God. I mean, we had a little bit of comedy in the Daeron stuff of her going up and looking at his roots, and then Alicent's face throughout this episode has been very comedic, very funny. When Rhaenyra goes and asks her, where's the money? And she's looking around like, who are you talking to? I laughed a little bit. But anyways, the dragon seeds, the naming of the dragon seeds. Ulf's reaction is very funny. How are you going to style yourself? I'm sure he's never even thought of this. He thought that knights got castles. So he just throws out like a crowd pleaser, just being like, Targaryen, obviously, we're family. And you can just see on Daemon and Rhaenyra's face, they're just like, can you believe this guy? No. We're not gonna hug you. We're not gonna be family with you. We're not gonna be buddy-buddy with you. You cannot be a Targaryen. And I will say, hey, maybe throw out some name suggestions for him. Instead of just saying, pick one, figure it out. So he picks White because white hair? Sure, why not? And then Rhaenyra, who has been requested by Corlys to name Adam and Alan Velaryons, last minute just decides she can't do it. And this is a very interesting thing, and we'll talk about this. I'm not super thrilled with Corliss's reaction, but I don't think either of them have handled this situation well. And I think it makes sense for this moment. You just told Ulf and basically Hugh that no, you can't be Targaryen, you can't have a trueborn name. So then to name Adam a Velaryon, that could cause some problems. But also, like, the way she again just dismisses Corlys when they do have their confrontation and she says, oh, well, maybe at some point, like, it just was handled poorly. I've seen many people state, and I agree with this, she should have said, oh, I want it to be a bigger ceremony. She could have just explained the, Ulf Hugh thing of like, hey, I just want to make a little bit of a separation, a delineation, because naming Ulf and Hugh Targaryen with their big dragons, that could be really bad. Those could be potential claimants for the throne. So it makes sense again to like separate this a little bit. Yes, I'll name them Velaryons. Let's set a date. Let's make it not seem like a maybe one day we'll do it and let's make a plan. But instead, she kind of just brushes it off and is like, well, the legitimacy of my own sons, and makes it sound like I'm not gonna do it instead of a not right now. And to be fair, she does say that. She just says not right now, but the way she's saying not right now kind of sounds like never. And that sets Corlys off. And I will say, I don't like how Corlys reacted. To me, it felt out of character for him. Corlys Velaryon is prideful, yes, but he's not stupid. He's prideful enough to marry his very obviously gay son to Rhaenyra in order to try to put his descendants on the throne. Yes, he is prideful, and he has messed up and he's trying to make up for lost time, but then he's demanding immediately, like, we need to do these things now, and he's not reading the room of how chaotic everything is. And to me, that just feels out of character for him. That feels kind of stupid. And he knows that, hey, we've just taken King's Landing. We need to look unified. Everyone knows that. Everyone should know that. You need to put on a unified public front. You are the hand of the queen. We don't even have a small council yet. We don't have money. We can't be seen bickering in front of other people. But what does he do? He very loudly yells that her children are bastards in front of a bunch of people. A statement that has gotten other people killed. His own family killed. So it's a very bold and defiant and frankly kind of disrespectful move. And to be fair, yes, he himself is feeling disrespected by what Rhaenyra has done, but it's just not a good look in front of other people. Have this conversation privately, figure it out. You cannot let other people, servants, see you cracking. People gossip, people will discuss it. And again, I think Corlys is smart enough to know that, so I just don't really understand this change. And to be fair, too, Jace just died a few days ago defending Corlys's ships. So it's kind of a cruel thing to say too. That again just does not feel in character for who we've seen Corlys be. And the only thing I can think of is that in the book in Fire and Blood, Alicent has this line about bastard blood shed at war. Her and Rhaenyra are constantly at each other's throats. They're not friends in the book. And so I feel like they were trying to bring in some of that conflict, but obviously they can't have it between Alicent and Rhaenyra for what they're doing with their characters in the show. So instead they give it to Corlys. And again, I just don't love it because to me it feels like it sacrifices a bit of the continuity of his character. It's just not my favorite choice. But we'll see where it goes. I feel like it's going to continue to brew because I think Rhaenyra is going to continue to refuse to name the boys Velaryon, which again is a change from the book. In the book, she has no problem naming them Velaryon, but in the show, I think it will continue because there's this clip, I believe in the trailer, where it says like the Queen of Bastards that's written on a wall. So I wonder if she will either refuse to do it or if she will do it and that'll make her look really bad. Like if it'll be kind of a bad PR move to do this, that'll ultimately come back to bite her. But it's one of those things that it's like, again, there is no winning. You have to please your hand, you have to please Corlys, but in order to do that, you are sacrificing some of your credibility. It'll ultimately be a decision that sacrifices some of her public image. So, in her control, a little bit out of her control. I kind of think everyone was a little bit wrong in that interaction, and I think it's just going to keep getting worse. And now, all of these things then compound into a very messy first few days of Rhaenyra ruling. I'm sure I've missed out on a couple other small interactions that also didn't go well, but overall it just paints this picture of Rhaenyra maybe not being prepared, or being set up to fail, or being just bad at ruling. All up in the air, all debatable. If you ask different people in the fandom, they will give you different answers. But what's undeniable is that it's not going well. It's going really bad. And so overall, I think this episode did a really good job at showcasing that, hey, kind of sucks to rule on the Iron Throne. Nobody should be doing it. Kind of the worst. And just the stress and the pressure of it all. You could just really feel it compounding in a way too that like with some of the shots being the back of her head and kind of circling around, I almost felt like I was the migraine brewing in Rhaenyra's head. And all of that was intentional. On the inside the episode, they talk about these specific, camera angles and shots wanting to be really in Rhaenyra's mind in her POV. They also noted that they were inspired by the movie Conclave, and I absolutely love that movie. And once they said that, I could totally see it. Just really intense, kind of nitty-gritty politics, looking at the POV of a character, a lot of walking around, a lot of quick talking, just absolutely fun stuff. It's my favorite stuff, honestly, in Thrones and in these worlds. And with that, this POV style, I've seen other people say, and I agree with this, it's honestly the closest thing we've ever gotten to a book POV adaptation. In the A Song of Ice and Fire main series, each chapter follows a specific character in their point of view. Some of the points of view are a little bit more zoomed out and looking at them on the outside, like for example in some of Daenerys' chapters, whereas other chapters are really just insular and in their head, like in some of Catelyn's POVs, and of course in some of Cersei's POVs. In Cersei's POVs, you genuinely start to question reality around her because she is just so warped and insane in her thinking. And so with this episode, yeah, this is honestly the closest thing we've ever gotten to a kind of POV chapter adaptation. And I thought it was really fun because it gave us a little bit of a glimpse of honestly what Fire and Blood could have looked like if it was written in the same style as the main A Song of Ice and Fire series. I would have loved that. I would think it's very fun. But the nature of Fire and Blood is written the way it is so that we can kind of debate and look at it and try to glean what is real and what's not, what is propaganda. And ultimately, the kind of messaging of the show of House of the Dragon, we were kind of told was originally to show the true story. And in some cases, I think they've taken quite a bit of liberty with that. But with this episode in particular, this is what I had in mind when they said that. When they said, we're getting to the true core of what happened. In Fire and Blood, we're basically just told, the coffers were emptied, they had no money. But here we see the actual on-the-ground repercussions of what that looks like in real time. Very fun stuff. To me, just this show so far with season 3 has been knocking it out of the park with every episode. And I was a little bit nervous because the first 2 episodes were episodes 9 and 10 of the last season. So it makes sense that they would be big. It's a penultimate and finale episode. So this episode 3, was really the first real episode of season 3. And with that, I was a little bit nervous that it wouldn't be as good, wouldn't be as big as fantastic. And while it wasn't as big, it definitely was just as fantastic in my opinion. I would love more of this style, but I think the beauty in it is having it be kind of a singular thing. Overall, just wonderful episode. I cannot praise it enough. And if these first 3 episodes are anything to go by, I think we are in for a fantastic season. But with that, those are my full thoughts on the episode. Let's talk a little bit about future predictions. So in the future, in the immediate, it looks like we are going to be seeing Alice and Aemond. And can I say, I absolutely love Alice Rivers' new dress. She is fully decked out in that Simon Strong drip. She looks fabulous. This gown is just gorgeous. And really so far in this season, a lot of the costumes feel like they have been stepped up. A lot of the wigs look a lot better. And so I'm really excited to see what other cosplayers do. But this dress is definitely on my cosplay dream list. The purple velvet, it just looks very dreamy. It kind of has like a Morgana vibe. And I love this pearl waist chain and this pearl necklace, which looks honestly kind of similar to the necklace Helena is wearing. And I wonder if that's connected in any way, because I believe that Gail Rankin said that her and Fia do share some scenes this season. So I wonder if this is like a little visual Easter egg, a little nod. But yes, so it seems like we will be getting some Alice in the next episode, probably some Aemond, definitely Alice interacting with Cole and Gawain. It seems like it is their turn to be in the Harrenhal House of Horrors, and Alice Rivers looks like she is just fully reigning now as this queen of Harrenhal, this lady of Harrenhal, and I love to see it. But with that too, probably getting more Helena soon. There was a post on Instagram from what may be Helena's stunt double. Maybe she's going to be interacting with her dragon Dreamfire, and we do still need to figure out what's going on in this scene where it looks like Helena's giving birth, and in these scenes of her talking to Rhaenyra, and this scene of her looking kind of elven and intense. And other than that, she's wearing a lot of these beautiful blue gowns that again kind of evoke her dragon Dreamfire. So I'm predicting in the next couple episodes we'll just be getting a lot more Helena, and I'm here for it. And with that too, more Alicent. In Fire and Blood during this time, Alicent is kind of, monikered as the queen in chains. Her and Helena are kept as prisoners, and there's a lot of debate as to what goes on with them. Some of the rumors are pretty salacious and gross, and I don't think we will be getting any of that, but what I do think we'll be getting is Rhaenyra Rhaenyra going to Alicent more and more as somewhat of an advisor. I've seen some people say that she will become somewhat of an unofficial member of the small council, maybe. And I think with that, with Alicent's styling this season, it is hinting at her being a little bit more humble, or moreover, humbled in her role, in her influence. I've seen people complaining about the dresses she's wearing, but again, she's a prisoner. And I've seen people complaining about her hair. And I have a couple thoughts on this. One, the more glamorous styles we see her rock in season 1 was really to kind of denote her mentality at the time, which was, kind of high and mighty. She is the queen, she is beautiful, she's glamorous. She seemed to be competing with Rhaenyra a little bit. She was very jealous of Rhaenyra. And we have to remember too, there is a time jump. And so I think to showcase that she has aged a bit, they make her hair a little bit less glamorous. And I think it's effective because Olivia Cooke is only a few years older than the actors playing her sons, which is kind of ridiculous. She has pointed this out. So it makes sense that they would try to then remedy this by maybe doing some things that age her a bit. And then also, in the previous seasons, she was not wearing a wig. This is Olivia's real hair with a lot of hair extensions to make it longer. Whereas now she is wearing a wig. And wigs tend to kind of flatten the scalp, flatten the hairline. They just look a little bit flatter in general, which might be leading to the look. And then also the third thing is there's a different costume designer. House of the Dragon season 2 and 3 have a different costume designer than season 1. The costume designer for season 1 seemed to favor the more glamorous, bold look, bigger hair, more jewelry, shinier fabrics than what we are getting now. So I think all of those things could lend to the difference. But again, this kind of newer look for Alicent seemingly coincides with the trend of her character last season. She's giving up certain things a little bit. She's becoming more humble. She's getting back to the roots of who she is as a person. She's kind of stripping away the finery. And while yes, I love a glamorous look, I would prefer it, I don't mind a more toned down look or even a character looking ugly. Not that she looks ugly at all, she doesn't. But, there have been times in the show where a character wears a ugly, arguably ugly outfit and people really hate it. But to me, if it works with the character and it tells a story, I'm totally okay with it. Sometimes a character needs to look a certain way in order to convey the story or message. Costumes don't need to be pretty all the time. Women don't need to be glamorous all the time. Sometimes the difference is intentional. And I think with her, it is. I think it coincides well with where her character is going. If you want my full thoughts on the Marjorie Tyrell burrito dress, let me know. They are controversial. They are contrary to the popular belief. But with that, Aegon and Larys, I think we'll be seeing them in the next episode. I hope so. We need to continue the buddy road trip comedy, but clearly they're not getting to Cole in the next episode, because again, Cole and Gawain are having to do their Harrenhal House of Horrors moment. Apparently we will see Lady Jane Eyre in the next episode, so I'm thinking Daemon is probably going to go to the Vale to try to suss out the sheep stealer stuff, and I feel like Lady Jane Eyre is going to be like, I've never seen a dragon in my life, I don't know what you're talking about. I think we'll continue to see Rhaenyra's struggles in King's Landing, definitely not as much as last episode. I mean, we might not even really focus on her that much at all in this next episode. I'm sure we'll see her a little bit, but I wouldn't be surprised if we catch up with these other characters more. And again, they are really building up the Tumbleton stuff. While watching the show, my partner said that Hugh's wife seems to be taking acting classes at the Christopher Nolan School of Dead Wives. She is just very clearly marked for tragic death in a way that probably will motivate and change Hugh as a character, which is not my favorite trope, the fridging wife trope, the fridging gaze trope, but I'm not gonna jump the horse. Maybe they can, shift it, utilize it in a way that is fresh and interesting. Maybe it won't be entirely about that. Maybe Hugh will also see just the destruction at Tumbleton. Who knows? Either way, they clearly are building up momentum to it. And lastly, I wanted to talk about the brief The World of Ice and Fire little lore mention, which was the City of the Winged Men. This is mentioned when Daemon and Rhaenyra talk, and throughout this season, we've had a lot of little teeny tiny mentionings to bits of lore and places in the World of Ice and Fire. And I think this is all intentional, because House of the Dragon is wrapping up after season 4, but with that, they have been teasing a Corlys Velaryon spinoff, The Sea Snake and His 9 Voyages, as well as a Yi Ti spinoff. So it makes sense to start kind of peppering in these little references to obscure and interesting places. Because with this mention of the City of the Winged Men, I've already seen people say, that sounds so interesting, I want to know more about that. And you know where you could learn more about that? In the Corlys Velaryon show. Or maybe in the Jon Snow spinoff that now, according to sources online, is being reworked into a Arya sailing around the world, sailing around Westeros, exploring Bravo spinoff. Maybe she'll go to some of these obscure magical places. I have absolutely been loving these little references because I love the more magical elements of the world. The city of the winged men is a place where it's said that men soar on leather wings and fly like eagles. And it's on the very edge of the world, and that's all we know about it. So it really opens up the question of, are these really men with wings? Or are they flying on flying contraptions? Maybe this is a reference to George R. R. Martin's other book, Windhaven, where people fly with these mechanical wings. Or maybe it's a little bit of a reference to the more magical and obscure things existing at the periphery of the world, because this is fantasy after all. And there are elements that are highly fantastical. The Valyrians did strange blood magic, crossing their DNA with dragons. So maybe these are people who quite literally are the grown-up Valyrian amalgamations. I mean, Valyria had an entire slave colony built to creating these unnatural chimera hybrid people. Maybe these are grown-up dragon lizard people. Because we do also have mentionings of lizard people, of eyeless cave dwellers, of giant hybrids, of children of the forest kind of hybrid people. I did a video series over on TikTok when I first started making videos all about the magical evolution in this world. Maybe one day I will redo it and bring it over here to YouTube. But the point is that there are these kind of magical, strange elements on the periphery of the world that are there to make us kind of question what is truly going on. How much is truly in the control of the people? How much of this world is truly fantastical? How much of it is just kind of hearsay at the edge of the world because the maesters don't really know what's going on? So maybe in these future kind of spin-off shows, we'll find some of the truth in those elements. A last thing too, I hope we see more of the lads. If we're seeing Cole and Gawain and their kind of garrison get to Harrenhal, I think it makes sense to then see the other side, you know, coming throughout the Riverlands, because they will kind of eventually clash and continue to clash throughout the Dance of the Dragons. I would like to see more Black Aly and more Oscar Tully. And we do know that the actress that plays Sabitha Frey is going to be in this season, so maybe this is where we'll see her in episodes, 4 or 5. But yeah, with that, I think those are all my thoughts on this episode. I really enjoyed it, and I will leave you with a last question. So with this episode largely being in the POV of Rhaenyra, I think it would be too much to have an entire show filmed like this. I think people would get a little bit bored. But if you could have any POV chapter from A Song of Ice and Fire adapted like this, what chapter would you want and why? I would love to see some of the Cersei chapters adapted, because I just think it would be crazy and fun. And with all of that, if you've made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. Again, please feel free to like and subscribe. And if you have any other video ideas for me in the future, let me know. Okay, bye. And lastly, you might be saying, Estella, who are you cosplaying today? You always cosplay someone in your videos. And the answer is, I'm cosplaying Estella going to a Wes Anderson concert after filming this video. I'm cosplaying the one Targaryen with a Criterion collection and funky little glasses and a vinyl collection. I need to put like a 10-second clip of that song that says, I'm going to the country.
Yeah. Well, we can put some footage from tonight.
Very, very short clip that doesn't get me copyright striked.